I've worked over 1,000 crime scenes. I've seen everything from dismembered bodies to murder-suicides staged to look like accidents. But nothing prepared me for what I found in that quiet suburban house in Phoenix, Arizona. They always say the devil is in the details. What they don't say is how quiet the devil can be. The call came in just past 6 a.m. A neighbor reported that the front door to a house on Marigold Lane had been wide open since the night before. Phoenix PD responded, found a body inside, and called me when the scene didn't make sense. It rarely does when I get involved. The house belonged to Paul Whitaker, a 38-year-old financial analyst. Divorced, no kids, clean record. The kind of guy who knew exactly how many steps it took to get from his kitchen to his couch. Routine, predictable. When I stepped into that house, the air was still, no signs of struggle, no broken glass, no forced entry. The door wasn't kicked in. It was unlocked. But what got me was the alarm system. It was off. Now, that might not sound strange at first. People forget to set alarms all the time. But Paul was meticulous. According to his ex-wife, who I spoke with later, he was obsessive about security. Every window had sensors. He even had motion detectors installed inside. The system was connected to his phone, and he had push notifications turned on. If a fly farted in that living room, Paul got a ping. But that morning, no alerts, no activation logs. The system had been disabled from inside the house, and not by Paul. He was found in his bedroom. No signs of trauma, no blood, lying on his side like he'd just gone to sleep and never woke up. But the coroner's preliminary report said otherwise. He'd been suffocated, smothered, no fibers in his throat, which told me it wasn't a pillow. Probably a plastic bag, removed after death. Clean kill, personal, quiet. The killer knew what they were doing. I started scanning the house, looking for anything. Dust patterns, disturbed surfaces, impressions in the carpet. That's when I noticed something odd in the kitchen. A mug in the sink, still wet inside. No fingerprints, no lipstick, just tea. The kind of detail you miss if you're not looking. There was no tea in the house. Paul only drank black coffee, confirmed by his pantry, which was lined with boxes of K-cups like soldiers in formation. But the mug had faint traces of chamomile. Someone else had made themselves at home. I pulled the security logs from the alarm company. The last time the system was armed was at 10:14 p.m. the night before. Then, at 1:27 a.m., it was deactivated using the master code, Paul's code. But here's the thing. Paul always kept the code written on a sticky note inside a locked drawer in his desk. Something I found during the sweep. It was still there. So whoever deactivated the alarm knew the code before they got in. Or they didn't need it. That's when I went into the basement. According to house blueprints, it was just storage and HVAC. But there was something off about the west wall. It stuck out a few inches farther than it should have. I started knocking, tapping, listening. Hollow, behind a false panel, was a narrow crawl space, an old storm shelter from the 1960s. Sealed off during a renovation, except it wasn't sealed. There were footprints in the dust. And a makeshift bedding area with protein bar wrappers, a flashlight, and a journal. That journal changed everything. The entries were written in blocky, erratic handwriting. Paranoid, disjointed. Someone had been living in that space for weeks, maybe months, watching Paul, studying his routines, learning when he slept, when he ate, what code he used for the alarm. He called himself the witness. He wrote about Paul in the second person. You came home late tonight. You forgot to lock the basement again. I could hear you snoring. But what really made my stomach turn was the final entry. Tonight, I'm going to finally touch the silence. You won't hear it coming. No one will. I practiced the breathing. I practiced the waiting. I'm ready. I reviewed the house's renovation records and discovered something else. Paul bought the house 3 years ago from a man named Daniel Morse. Morse was a recluse, filed for bankruptcy, disappeared after the sale. Guess who left fingerprints all over that crawl space? Daniel Morse. He had never left. He'd been living under Paul's house the entire time. The renovations had accidentally reopened the sealed shelter, and Morse took it as a sign. He returned and waited. No one heard a thing. No neighbor saw anyone enter. And Paul? He was living above a ticking time bomb. The final piece came when we found Morse 4 days later, hiding inside an abandoned construction site 2 miles away. He hadn't run far. I was there when they brought him in. He didn't resist, just looked at me and said, "I was already home." I've seen monsters with guns, knives, fire, but Morse? He used patience. He weaponized silence. He didn't break in, he waited in. And that alarm? It never went off because there was no alarm for what was already inside. That case stuck with me. Still does. Because we spend so much time preparing for the enemy at the gates, we forget to check the basement. You hear me? Always check the basement. There are two things I always notice first when I walk onto a crime scene: the silence and the smell. This one had both. Chicago, winter, icy wind cutting through every alley like a scalpel. I got the call just before dawn, body in a South Side alley, behind an old boxing gym that hadn't seen a fight in years. The officer on scene said something didn't sit right. He was right. When I got there, the body was already frozen. A male mid-30s. No ID, coat soaked in blood, but oddly, no visible bullet holes or stab wounds. Just trauma to the face. Severe, the kind of impact you'd expect from a bat or pipe. But as I looked closer, I realized something even stranger. Every one of his teeth had been shattered. Not cracked, destroyed. Pulverized, gums torn, jaw dislocated. But there was no blood trail leading to or from the body. No signs of a fight. No bruising on the knuckles. And here's the kicker. There wasn't enough blood on his face to match the trauma. That told me one thing. The teeth were broken after he was already dead. Who does that? Why? Back at the lab, we got to work. Fingerprints were useless, burned with acid. DNA ran cold. No matches in Cody's. It was like the guy had never existed. That made me suspicious. People don't go to that kind of trouble unless they have something serious to hide or someone's trying really hard to erase them. I asked me to prioritize the dental x-rays. Even with the damage, there were remnants, fillings, root canals, enamel composition. Most people don't know this, but dental records are more unique than fingerprints. Problem is, you need a match to compare to. So I went old school. I started going clinic by clinic in the Chicago metro area, narrowing by demographics, age, and geography. After 3 days of dead ends, I got a hit. A small private dental practice in Oak Lawn had filed a missing patient report months earlier. The guy had stopped showing up for appointments. His name? Gregory Lance. Occupation? Freelance software engineer. Quiet. Paid in cash. Lived alone. No family listed. His dentist, Dr. Mason, remembered him clearly. He had perfect hygiene. Almost obsessive. Told me he was afraid of being identified if something ever happened to him. Weird thing to say to your dentist, right? Turns out, Lance had been going through something. Paranoid behavior. Asking about how dental records are stored. Who could access them. I asked to see the digital files. And that's when something jumped out. The x-rays in the system had been modified. Subtle distortions, like someone had cloned portions of them, erased fillings, tweaked structure, but not very well. Someone had replaced the real x-rays. But who and why? I pulled surveillance from the clinic's front desk. 2 weeks before Lance stopped showing up, someone had accessed the records room late at night. Not a break-in, key card entry. Timestamp matched Dr. Mason's login. But when I confronted him, he looked genuinely shocked. I wasn't here that night, and he wasn't lying. Security footage showed someone in a lab coat entering the practice at 3:13 a.m. hood up, gloves on. Didn't take anything. Just a USB plugged into the central terminal for about 12 minutes. Long enough to swap files. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about hiding who Gregory was. It was about replacing him. I had the crime scene reprocessed. Searched the alley again, inch by inch. Found something wedged behind a frozen drain pipe. Tiny, Almost missed it. A partial dental plate. Artificial. Custom. Not made for Gregory, but for someone else. We ran the plate's mold through our dental lab and cross-referenced it with a high-end cosmetic dental provider in Lincoln Park. They only served private clients. Expensive. Exclusive. I asked for a list of patients who'd had full dental reconstruction in the last 6 months. One name stood out. Elliot Crane. He was the same height, weight, and build as Gregory. Only difference? Elliot Crane had never existed before 6 months ago. No social security number before that. No driver's license. No childhood records. But he had a condo, a bank account, and a passport. He was a ghost. I got a warrant. Raided the condo. Empty except for one room. Soundproofed. Surgical lights. Dental equipment. Fake documents. Photos of Gregory. Journals. Practicing his signature. Mannerisms. Voice. Even the way he tied his shoes. This wasn't murder. It was identity theft taken to the extreme. Elliot, whoever he really was, had studied Gregory for months, reconstructed his mouth, erased all trace of his own identity, then killed Gregory, destroyed his teeth, and tried to swap dental records to make it look like he was the one who died. But he got sloppy. The plate didn't fit perfectly. The X-ray modifications weren't clean. And the body? He left it in an alley where the cold preserved everything, including his mistake. We finally caught Elliot 2 weeks later trying to cross into Canada. He had dyed his hair, grown a beard, removed several tattoos with acid. But teeth? Even fake ones tell the truth eventually. When I interviewed him, he never blinked, just stared at me and said, "Do you know what it's like to disappear? To really disappear?" "Yeah, I do. But I also know what it's like to chase ghosts and drag them back into the light. You can change your name. You can burn your prints. But your past? It always leaves bite marks." I've always said, safes don't just protect secrets. They tell them. Every fingerprint, every scratch, every misplaced speck of dust is a breadcrumb. But when I stepped into the penthouse suite on the 42nd floor of the Alder Heights building in downtown Seattle, I found something I'd never seen before, a wide-open safe without a single print, not even from the victim. That's not just rare. That's impossible. The call came in just after 5 a.m. A security guard doing a routine patrol found the door to the penthouse ajar. The tenant, Maxwell Reeve, was inside, dead. No blood, no gunshot, no obvious trauma. Just collapsed beside his office chair, eyes wide open, face pale. He looked more shocked than scared. Maxwell wasn't just anyone. He was a private wealth manager. Quiet, brilliant, the guy people trusted with millions. High-profile clients. Tight lips, lived alone, no pets, no wife, no close family. Just a man in his fortress of money. The scene was too clean. The alarm hadn't gone off. No signs of forced entry. The electronic lock on the front door showed it had been opened at 2:13 a.m. using Maxwell's own keycard. But security footage from the hallway? Blank. A network error during a 3-hour window. Inside his study, the safe stood open, massive, bolted into the concrete. Inside, empty. No documents. No USBs. No cash. Only a single glove, latex, folded and laid neatly in the corner. It had no prints. Nothing did. Even the mouse on Maxwell's desk, his glass of water, the drawer handles, clean as if they'd been wiped and polished by a professional. Except there was no evidence of cleaning solution. No streaks. No residue. You don't clean a crime scene that well without leaving something behind. That meant one thing. The scene hadn't been cleaned. It had been handled in a way that never left prints to begin with. But how? The autopsy came back with a shocker. Maxwell didn't die from trauma or poison. His heart simply stopped. Sudden cardiac arrest. No toxins. No prior heart conditions. Nothing genetic. It was like his body just gave up. But I've seen death by fear before. Rare, but real. It takes something extreme. Not pain, not shock, terror. And that office, it felt off. Cold, sterile. Like whoever was in there didn't just take something. They measured it first. I started digging into Maxwell's recent communications. Almost nothing. No email for 48 hours before his death. No outgoing calls. Except one. A 19-second call to a number in Montana. No contact name. No voicemail. Just static on playback. I traced the number. Burner phone. Registered to a woman named Carla Vicks, a tech security consultant. The name rang a bell. 3 years ago, she'd been charged but not convicted in a corporate espionage case. The charges were dropped due to lack of physical evidence. That made her exactly the kind of person who could do this. I tracked her down in Spokane, got her in for questioning. At first, she denied everything, but then I showed her the safes model, an older European design with a bypass flaw. She'd written a paper on a decade ago. Her reaction wasn't guilt. It was admiration. Whoever opened that safe, she said, didn't pick the lock. They understood it. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a heist. It was a message. I went back to the glove, ran a more advanced scan, not for fingerprints, but for microscopic residue. We found something unusual. Fine fibers of a rare material used in tactile suppression gloves. Military grade. Designed for espionage. They allow the user to interact with objects without leaving any oil, sweat, or friction signature. And the prints? There were prints. Just not where you'd expect. We found them on the inside of the safe's door. Barely visible heat impressions. One set. Long fingers. Precise spacing. Someone opened that safe with surgical precision, using a custom glove, and only touched what they absolutely needed to. I pulled Maxwell's bank activity. 2 days before his death, a transfer, $2.1 million wired to a private crypto wallet in the Cayman Islands. No name attached, but the transaction hash matched another wallet, tied to a former CIA asset flag for deep system penetrations. Digital and physical. Maxwell had paid someone off. My guess? To stage a robbery. Maybe to fake his own death. Or destroy blackmail material. But something went wrong. What if he hadn't expected them to actually come? Or worse, what if he invited them and saw who it was? The safe wasn't just empty. It was surgically violated. Whoever did it didn't need to kill Maxwell. They just had to stand in front of him and let him understand. I know everything. I got in. I took it. And you'll never trace it. That kind of psychological dominance, it can stop a heart cold. In the end, we never found the contents of the safe. We never identified the intruder. No DNA, no fingerprints, no mistakes. But we did find something else. Etched lightly on the inside wall of the safe, behind where the documents would have been. A single word, carved so faintly it was almost missed. Audit. I still don't know what it meant. Maybe a warning. Maybe a code. But one thing's clear. Whoever opened that safe wasn't just after money. They were after control. Because the scariest criminals don't force their way in. They make you open the door yourself. I processed crime scenes where blood painted the walls like an abstract nightmare. Every drop telling a story of struggle, chaos, rage. But in this case, the story didn't match the blood. It was the first thing that struck me when I stepped into that quiet, 2-story house in Fort Worth, Texas. A man was found in the kitchen, unresponsive, soaked in blood. But here's the twist. None of it was his. It was a Friday night. The 911 call came from a man himself. Dean Walters, 41, a retired firefighter. Calm voice, no panic. He told dispatch he had come home and found something bad in the kitchen. By the time officers arrived, he was on the floor, clothes soaked, hands trembling, but otherwise uninjured. When I arrived, it looked like a horror movie. Blood splattered across the fridge, puddled on the tile, streaked on the cabinets. A bloody knife on the counter. And yet, no victim, no body. No drag marks. Dean sat on a kitchen chair, expression blank. Not confused, not frightened, just vacant. Paramedics cleared him. His vitals were stable, no visible wounds. But when I took a closer look at the pattern of blood on his shirt, it didn't make sense. There were no arterial spray patterns, no back spatter, just soaking, like someone had dumped blood on him. Not like he'd been part of a violent struggle. I asked him gently, "Dean, whose blood is this?" He just looked at me and said, "I thought it was mine." That's when I knew I was standing in the middle of something bigger. We started processing. No signs of forced entry. All doors locked from the inside. Windows intact. Security system inactive, but no signs that had been disabled. Kitchen was clean, no broken dishes, no toppled chairs. Just blood. Way too much for a single person to lose and walk away. We collected the blood samples and ran them. The first results came in 2 hours later. The blood wasn't Dean's, and it didn't belong to a single person either. It belonged to 2 separate individuals, neither of whom were in the house, neither of whom were in the National DNA database. That meant we were looking at a staged scene. But staged how? And for what? We ran a luminol sweep. More blood. On the doorknob, under the kitchen sink, leading up the stairs, but no exit trail. If there were 2 victims, where were the bodies? Upstairs, in the master bedroom, we found something odd. Dean's closet was half empty. Clothes gone. A suitcase missing. In the bathroom trash, a cut-up credit card, a SIM card snapped in half, and a train ticket stub to El Paso, dated 3 days ago. That's when the timeline broke. Dean said he had returned from a fishing trip with friends that morning, but his phone records placed him near El Paso 2 nights earlier. Security cameras near a rest stop in Pecos captured him alone, buying a burner phone and duct tape. I brought him in for questioning. He didn't resist. He sat across from me, still quiet, but more alert now. I asked again, "Dean, whose blood was in your kitchen?" He hesitated, then whispered, "I don't know her name." That stopped me. I asked what he meant. He said, slowly, "They brought her to the house. I didn't know what they were planning." I leaned in. "Who's they?" He said, "2 men, strangers, said they needed a place to talk to someone. They offered me 10 grand to let them use my house for a night." I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know. According to Dean, the men arrived 3 nights ago with a woman, hooded, hands bound. They kept her in the basement. Dean claims he never went down there. Said he stayed upstairs, pretended he didn't hear the sounds. But eventually, he did. The scream stopped. And when he finally went downstairs, curiosity, guilt, maybe both, there was only blood. No bodies. No men. Just the knife and the silence. The deal was over. They left without a word. And Dean? He sat there for hours. Frozen. Processing. Until something in his mind cracked and he called 911. We checked the basement. It had been cleaned. Too well. Bleach residue. Scrubbed walls. But under the drain cover, we found dry blood. Same match as in the kitchen. I had forensics run 3D laser mapping on the kitchen splatter. Trajectory was inconsistent. Blood had been poured, not sprayed, which confirmed it. This wasn't the scene of a murder. It was the aftermath of one. A cleanup with a theatrical flourish. But here's where it gets colder. The burner phone found in the bathroom trash had 1 number in its call log, dialed only once. A number registered to a warehouse outside Albuquerque. Police raided it. Found another blood pool, hand restraints. No people. It was a relay point. What we were seeing wasn't a one-off. It was part of something organized, mobile, efficient, underground. Dean didn't know the whole story. Maybe didn't want to, but he was complicit. Maybe not in the killing, but in the silence. In the end, we charged him with obstruction, an accessory after the fact. He got a reduced sentence for cooperation. But the woman? The 2 men? We never found them. Just blood. Just silence. And a man who said with absolute sincerity that he thought the blood was his, because guilt has a way of soaking through you until you forget where it even started. Sometimes the scariest scenes aren't about what happened, but what's already gone. I was already halfway through my second coffee when the call came in. Possible suicide. 3rd floor. Window fall. But the dispatcher's voice had that tone, subtle but unmistakable. She knew something wasn't adding up. I could hear in the pause before she said, possible. The address was in a quiet part of Baltimore, East Side. Brick row houses. Older construction. The kind of neighborhood where people still leave their porch lights on and know their neighbors by name. Victim, Melissa Crane, 29. Freelance illustrator. Lived alone. Known to be quiet. Kept to herself. A neighbor found her body on the sidewalk just after 6 a.m. under the window of her 3rd floor apartment. Broken spine. Fractured skull. No witnesses. When I got there, the uniformed officers had already cordoned off the area. The body was still on site. The me was documenting injuries, consistent with a fall. But what caught my eye wasn't the body. It was the window. It was closed. Let me be clear. Not broken, not off the latch. Closed. That's the kind of detail that shoves everything else off the table. I went straight upstairs. Melissa's apartment was small, clean, minimalistic. Bedroom, bathroom, kitchen. A little work area by the window. That same window, the one she was supposed to have jumped from, was locked from the inside. Old-style latch, not the kind that shuts on its own. I asked the first question that always matters. If she jumped, who closed the window? There were no signs of forced entry. No prints but hers. Her phone was in the kitchen, unlocked. No recent messages. No calls during the night. No note. But there was something strange. On her desk, next to her drawing tablet, a stack of sketches. All the same image. A figure. Standing. Just outside a window. Always the same shape. Just slightly different positions. In the last one, it had one hand raised, touching the glass. I asked the neighbors. No screaming, no fighting. One woman said she heard footsteps above her around 3 a.m., like pacing. But no thud, no scream, nothing that sounded like a fall. The me came back with preliminary findings. Injuries matched the fall from that height. But here's the kicker. No signs of hesitation trauma. No bruising on the arms or legs to suggest she had climbed out. No glass fragments in her clothes. In fact, the way her legs were fractured suggested she'd landed feet first, as if she'd been lowered, not thrown. I checked the window again. No ledge, nothing to climb down, just a sheer drop. So how do you get a body from the 3rd floor to the pavement? And lock the window behind you? The only other way out was the front door. But the hallway camera showed no one leaving between 2:30 and 6 a.m. Melissa didn't leave. No one came in. I reviewed every frame again. And that's when I noticed something. At 3:17 a.m., there was a moment, a flicker. The hallway camera went dark for 5 seconds. No glitch before or after, just that one point. Enough time for someone to pass through. Now I had to ask, who knew her? Who had access? Melissa's landlord had keys. Said he hadn't been inside the apartment in weeks. His alibi? At home, asleep. But he lived just 2 floors below. I checked his phone records. He made no calls during the night. But he did receive a short call at 3:11 a.m. No caller ID. Duration, 9 seconds. That's not long enough for a conversation. That's a signal. I got a warrant. Searched his unit. In a drawer, behind some tax documents, I found an unlabeled USB. On it, footage. Not security cam footage. Personal recordings. Hidden cameras. Installed inside Melissa's apartment. He'd been watching her. For months. One of the clips, timestamped just 2 nights earlier, showed her drawing. Then pausing. Getting up. Walking to the window. Looking out. Staying there for nearly 5 minutes. Like she knew someone was out there. In the final clip, just minutes before the camera cut off for good, Melissa walks to her door, opens it, whispers something, then steps aside. She lets someone in. The footage ends. That was enough to bring him in. Under questioning, he broke down fast, said he'd been protecting her, that he knew someone else was watching too. That part confused me. Someone else? He said a man had contacted him weeks earlier, claimed to be Melissa's ex, offered money to keep the hallway camera off for one night. He agreed, didn't ask questions, just flipped the breaker at 3:17. That was the gap. Whoever the man was, he knew Melissa. She let him in. There was no struggle, no signs of violence. But then, somehow, she ended up dead on the street with her window closed behind her. I think the man carried her. Not alive, not conscious, maybe drugged, maybe already dead. He placed her outside the window, and then he dropped her. The body falls. The impact is real, but it's not suicide. It's theater. He closes the window, walks out, camera off, gone. No fingerprints, no murder weapon, just silence. To this day, we never found the man. No prints, no footage, no trace. Just Melissa's sketches. Over and over, that same figure. Watching, waiting, and the window that should have been open wasn't, because the smallest detail in a crime scene can scream the loudest, and sometimes the locked window tells you everything.